Alright, folks. So, finally trying to. We're now trying something new in the channel, but something that was planned. And however humble or simple or restricted the initial step may be, we intend to make the most of it. Because if you commit, with some consistency, with adequate effort, and you set the precedent, most importantly, your next precedent could intend to be more significant than the one prior. And in this sense, you always intend to do a little better. And as a result, of some time passing, it accumulates. All you're really doing, though, is putting in the effort, but along with effort, not forgetting creativity. Anyways, I went off on a tangent, so that is something you should expect, especially when I'm in this state. But anyways, the purpose of this channel, all right, this channel, but also it's the purpose of the podcast in particular. What advantages it could entail to the podcaster and stuff like that, and what could be incentivizing about one wanting to take this route, right, or make this commitment, which subsequently ought to be followed by action and effort intended in that pursuit, right? So after 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, with consistency, in every month uploading or sharing a particular number of videos, right? You assign this to yourself as homework. It's like a syllabus that you've designed for your own life. Why isn't always that the various syllabi that we are participating in gotta be ordered upon us to do, commanded upon us to do? Perhaps what separates a distinct individual is for him to be able to design his own syllabus in a particular way, in a particular sense, or in general, and see him committing to it and meeting those deadlines and showing expression in a different way, in a bold way, in an independent way. But anyways, the purpose of this podcast, another good thing they say about podcasting is you get to network. You meet various individuals, and these individuals refer you to other individuals. And you keep accumulating precedents, and you get to meet a variety of individuals. But some are bright, and more than others, more than majority. And you get to encounter these people and see what insights they may offer, and you try to basically perceive them, extract them, and whatever has an element of truth, at least in this facet, then you ought to take it into consideration. This is almost like for the purpose of feeding, of satiating your desire or your curiosity in particular. Yeah, so that is one. Another is how they describe blue collar people, white collar people, But for the people who do this sort of stuff, I remember Sam Harris describing it as being pink collar, I think. It's like the people who engage in modern day art, basically. It's become a form of art. You know, yeah, but I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that, but let's set that aside. Perhaps that's a discussion for another place and time. Yeah, but the purpose of this podcast is to network, is to learn, and is to teach. You know, it's a project that was assigned almost in how a teacher does to a person, except a person conceived this idea himself and then implemented it in his own life. So he basically bifurcated himself. Then it's him former, who lacked the courage to take the initial step, and him latter, who planned out and executed that decision. You know, one of my favorite quotes of all time is a quote by Bruce Lee. Because a lot of people only see him as a martial artist, and which is true. He was a brilliant martial artist, but he was also in the philosophy. He actually wrote a book, and I hope to buy this or next year. Striking Thoughts, Daily Wisdom for Daily Living. Yeah, a book by Bruce Lee, and there's a quote in there. All right, and now it may be difficult for me to try to remember it verbatim, but it's one that really resonates. That one could adopt as their motto. Actually, let me see if I can search it up so I don't butcher it. Let me search it up and present to you one of my most favorite quotes. It's like 4 lines, so it ain't too long. Sorry about this. Okay, found it. So I think this is from the book I mentioned already. And he says, knowing is not enough, we must apply. Willing is not enough, we must do. Now for me, that makes complete sense, If anything less than this is perhaps inadequate, it's inconsistency, it's hypocrisy. So you let's fly. You intend to not only learn, but from that lesson, try to implement it in some way. At least commit to trying to implement it in some way. And it's not only about conceiving that idea, thinking about doing it, preparing to do it, but actually doing it. And actually doing it, right? Exactly. So another thing people say to starting up on YouTube is you gotta start before you're ready. Start before you're ready. Now, in my case, that makes sense, right? Because I ain't nobody. Nobody knows by my name. I'm just putting myself out there. I ain't some renowned individual who just, hosted a reality show. No, I ain't a comedian. I ain't a fighter. I ain't nobody, I'm just a fella in Canada going on about trying to explore the world, what the hell it's about, what the hell's my purpose. I And it stretches far back, having an identity crisis, and this identity crisis manifesting in different ways and juxtaposing different ideas and trying to find out which which is most persuasive and trying to commit to that, aiming for consistency. Yeah, I guess this was interesting. Well, that's only 10 minutes. It's only 10 minutes. All right. I guess we could multiply that. Perhaps it'd be beneficial to multiply. So the point is, another good thing, or another thing to consider about starting YouTube is Gary V. He's somebody asked him about starting a YouTube channel and what advice he can give as Gary V being supposedly a successful podcaster, right? And Gary V, perhaps provided some insight when he said, perhaps it will take until episode 96 of your channel, of your content, of your content archives, I should say, is when your channel takes off, because it finally finds that niche and exploits it, basically, And then perhaps, this person could set up various ways, try to readjust, try to strategize, and commit to making this a full-time commitment, not a part-time hobby, a full-time commitment. Meaning resigning from employment, most likely, and going completely into, I don't know, selling merchandise or real estate or just content creation and collaboration. Simply put. But another thing I want you guys to consider is an idea in general. Imagine somebody from Africa, all right? Let's say Central Africa or something. And they come to the U.S., right? They come to the U.S. Say they're in Texas or something like that. Texas or I don't know, New York, right? And they learn, they grow up there and they get the hang of things and they start a podcast, right? They start a podcast, but the thing is, they're already big podcasters in the States. It'd be perhaps there's a lot of competition. That is what is meant to be said, or what is intended to imply. So what he does instead is, after he got 1,000, 2,000 followers, is to go back to Africa and try to present that podcast there. Try to tap into a new market. Now, this African example, just one example, right? Let's say this person was from Egypt, and in Egypt, let's say there was barely any podcasting going on, right? If any, very little, right? Or very small. So this guy comes back from the States after living there for several decades, comes back with a podcasting enterprise. He could become a monopolist here. So that's what ought to be considered. Now, of course, I'm not giving any specific details, but it's just an idea that you gotta consider in trying to understand the purpose and the goal of this podcast. All right, 15 minutes. We keep going. We keep going. The ideas are just heating up. Let me just get a sip of water here. Yeah, so we intend to invite people to this podcast, of course, and hopefully 2 of them can be done this week. That'd be ideal, and put on the channel, made public, and leaving an impression. At least if anybody else happens to stumble upon it in the in how hopefully the algorithm will portray us propitiously, right? So it actually finds the audience that could perhaps have the patience and the amusement to actually sit and listen. Now, I don't know if there are people out there like that, but I have a tinkling, I have an inkling, I should say, or a hunch that there are. That if perhaps this is egoistic of me to say, but I think there are people out there who, if they got to know me, if they got to heed me out, they'd be curious about what more I gotta say. But from one sense, this is the ego, you know? This is the ego trying to make it seem like you're distinct from everyone. So all you hope is that you're not blindly falling into that illusion, that you're observing things objectively as possible. But perhaps not. Perhaps not. Maybe it's the case that subjectively you've set it up in order to make your actions and your thoughts I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah. So we intend to have guests on, and the other thing is, if people are interested in joining this podcast as a guest and just engaging in this conversation, perhaps I aim for sobriety then, but I mean we could have a variation there, right? Perhaps with some people, they don't mind a drink or two, they don't mind a joint or two, but the thing is, we intend to discuss, not only converse, but discuss, present ideas, conceive ideas, and mix and amalgamate some of them, trim some of them, and come to hone your world perception, right? Yeah, perhaps I take this shit too far. I do. But the thing is, the intent of this particular episode was perhaps to take you on a ride on my train of thought. That was the intention. And if I was able to do that in the way at the maximum of capacity of then I have accomplished and what I had intended to do. But you see, the thing is, perhaps there are some things, there are some habits that are necessary to be for you to be able to present yourself in the full in the more enhanced, augmented expression of your thoughts, of your ideas, of your knowledge. Perhaps in this way, you're either declining or arising in the level of understanding and exchange. But yeah, we we intend to have two guests on hopefully this week. And if anybody else wants to join, please send an email, and I'll have the email hopefully down below, and just a short intro about yourself and maybe a website you got, or or a Twitter handle, or I don't know, whatever else you're engaged in, just to inform who you are and what you do and what you intend to do, right? I mean, right now, because I'm looking for guests, I can't be that selective, you know? Most importantly now is to basically get content out, right? You know, you're not at that echelon where you can be selective. You know, you got like a dozen people possible for that particular day. This dude is a professor. That person is a motorcyclist. That person is a skateboarder. That person is an athlete. That person is a professor. Just a minute. All right. Roommate tumbling around makes you anxious, I guess. To put it bluntly, to makes you anxious because you ain't supposed to be doing this. Well, whatever. It's my privacy, and I practice it how I feel. Right? You know, how some people say, a person like Jordan Peterson would say, is how your room looks like basically determines the state of your life. Is that what you mean your room usually looks like, or sometimes looks like? I mean, perhaps, in particular days of the week it looks like shit. But 5 days in the week it looks, better than mediocre. So, what determines the 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 setting of your life? Is it going well? Is it working out? Perhaps that's not the way you reckon. But it's something to consider, certainly. Another thing to consider, at least I would make the case of being more plausible, is a person you're trying to assess. Have they set a plan, and have they committed to them? Have they committed to them, executed them? Alright if they failed, but did they get back up on their feet and put in the effort again? You know? But most importantly, we all gotta realize that all our decisions lead us, perhaps a different direction in life. Think about this. Think about, you were born in Boston, right? But at the age of 20, you moved to Pittsburgh, and you lived there for the next 2 decades, and you meet your girlfriend, fiance, and your future wife. But the thing is, it's required of you to move to Pittsburgh in order for that to happen. But let's say you don't move to Pittsburgh. Let's say you move instead to Charlotte, South Carolina. What happens then? You don't meet that person. You never have that family. You never have that life. You never have the children that you would have had. So those people Some of them never came to be, but others you never came to consider or even come across. But that one decision of changing location had this magnitude of consequence, you know, is perhaps a stark contrast, But the thing is, let's say you move to Charlotte instead of Pittsburgh, and in both cases, you have a fiance and you get married. You get engaged and you get married. Do you and you have children? Let's say you have 2 children. But do those children and those spouses reminisce one another? Are they similar in some way? Is it the case that a person, in whichever place they could have been born, let's say a particular person, let's say you know them, your friend Kyle, in his particular habits, vices, virtues, his unique, peculiar characteristics, in his actions, his patterns. But let's say if Kyle was born in a different country. Let's say Kyle was born in Moscow, grew up there. Would there be similar or characteristics that remind you of the Kyle that was, let's say, born and raised in Detroit? Perhaps it does. Perhaps it does. And what that actually says is that it's not completely nurture that determines you as an individual, but nature plays a large part too. But there is a distinction, perhaps. The distinction is that this is not nature, as in the sense physical, DNA characteristics, but maybe it's the same spirit in different vehicles, as in the corporeal entity, the physical body is just a vehicle, and the spirit or the soul basically inhabits it, and acts out. It's like a driver, or but this soul is sort of like more intimately trapped in this vehicle than is the relationship between a driver and a car. It's like he can't take it off of himself. He can't take it off of himself. I mean, he gets a break in some nights for a couple minutes, but that's it. He's trapped in it, and he's got to be here for 7 to 8 decades in this state. But one wonders then, what happens if he is emancipated? Does he persist to be a single entity? Or would he just fuse in with all other entities of his ilk? Perhaps do. Because, you could have come across a resonating ideas of this sort. If you look into, let's say, the text in the literature concerning the remit of alchemy, and especially how they perceive divinity, and how forget where I was going with that, but anyways, it's probably obvious that sobriety isn't with me right now, but coming closer to it. Let me just get a sip of water here. Let's see. 30 minutes. 30 minutes, alright. I think we keep going for a little bit more. 40 minutes. 10 more minutes. But the thing is, let's put it this way. What is important is, as was advised, was that you gotta do it before you're ready. But how about if that takes a decade or two for you to have the confidence, the courage to do something you could have done 2 decades ago if you had just strategized with your consciousness in this certain sort of way in which you could exploit the advantages that it could give you, in the sense that it could make you less reserved and get you in the adventure of no reservation, just like Bourdain had done. But of course, Bourdain, some people would say, did not lead him on a right path, but I think that's unfair. I think, when I heard the story of Bourdain, it didn't really make me sad, because if you like and respect a person and they know they're sad, you don't particularly want to do what everyone already does. That is to sort of be a bunch of sycophants, right? Try to please you. But it ain't genuine. So if it ain't genuine, it don't matter. So you don't try to engage in that. But the thing is, if a man is in pain, whether that be physical or mental, philosophical, existential, if a man is in pain and chooses to subvert, undermine the supposed sacred status of your life, then let him be. Let him be. And him being able to do that, of course, it's harsh, it's horrifying, it's morbid, etc., etc. But the thing is, a person having the opportunity to do this is maybe encompassed in liberty and how he executes what he intends to execute without hurting nobody. Now, I think we're getting into real deep philosophical stuff, but I forget where I was going with that. Now, after coming up with that many minutes of recording, perhaps people could perceive that as being a risk in uploading. They say, well, wouldn't be a good idea. You're not presenting yourself in the most professional manner with adequate, proper etiquette, etc., etc., blah, blah, blah. But you also got to consider that by doing it this way, it helped you set the initial precedent. And precedent is important because if you set a precedent, you're basically setting a bar, a height that you could intend to then surpass and set a higher precedent. And you try to do that little by little, video by video, effort by, plan by plan, step by step, and that accumulates in 6 months, and 12 months, and 24 months, with consistent, you know, assignments, with and following them out with deadlines. But along with such consistent and determined effort is to not neglect the creative potential, but rather to present and express the creative potential. And perhaps that is what a person should really intend to search and find out in their own lives. What kind of activity, what kind of subject could they be creative in? And if they find that thing that they could be creative in, then pursue that and present your creativity in its max form. Try to practice it. Try to advance it. Hone it up. And then show what you got. You know? That alone could be a life's journey. You gotta consider that. So that is advice for people in general. Say in your adolescence or early 20s. I mean, perhaps later in life you've already figured this out, but basically try to seek out what it is that you are creative in and intend to tap into that potential and present it and commit to it and reach its maximum capacity, and see what comes of your life. Maybe it'd be a rewarding one, maybe not necessarily forget that word. But anyways, hopefully you enjoy some of that. And next time, perhaps I won't be in the state, but it was important that I did that. Done it with this new microphone hooked up to a dollar store item, and just a simple picture and rating text, and I rambling. Let's see if anybody finds anything useful or insightful in my rambles. Now, of course, when I'm an interlocutor, it won't just be me rambling, but it will be me having respect towards my interlocutor and trying to give consideration to their opinion and to their stance and to their efforts, But perhaps, if when possible, try to challenge them if you see that they have deviated from logic or common sense. That is important. But hopefully I can meet various individuals, learn from them, network with them, and hopefully this is setting a direction, a trajectory of some sort. And just as they say, if you redirect the point of your ship by a little bit, after much time, you end up in a totally different spot. So here you are as a person. You can set a direction in which the dominoes will fall, right? So in that way, you got several options, right? Perhaps one thing would be to commit to the plan you've conceived, ignore the plan you've conceived, or just do something else completely, or do nothing. But the thing is, the consequence of each of these decisions, especially some particular decisions, alternatively to others, is that they have different ramifications. And the person, the the person in the boat, in the kayak, rushing down the stream of life, comes about in by this stream instead of that one, But it was because he hadn't rolled to the right instead of the left, back over there by the rock, right? If you gone to the left, you could have gone down a different stream and come about a different place, a different circumstance. Now, if you use that metaphor for life, it would make sense. It would make sense, you know. But another metaphor to consider between the free will and determinism philosophy, right, or debate, I should say, which I've been talking about for the last few seconds at least, is that think about this metaphor: a pool table, but instead of one ball being white and the rest being striped and the others being full colored, is that and only one white ball hitting or aiming for and hitting other colored balls, would be that each ball on the table is white. So each ball is hit, targeting other balls. Let's say if there were a table of 20 white balls and they're all hit at the same time, that is sort of life. With your decision, you're hit and sent in a certain direction by the sake of your decision and a commitment to that decision. Let's say you move to Chicago. The result of you moving to Chicago and living there for several decades was this, instead of there, which you could have been hit or been sent or been committed to, and moving to Seattle or staying just in your town in Kentucky, all have magnitude of consequence. But anyways, I hope this is bearable. I hope this is intriguing and insightful whenever possible, and hopefully you appreciate my effort. You this upgrade I have made with hard-earned money, at a minimum wage job, right? But hopefully I was able to, at least in the minimum, try to present what I can do at this restriction of budget and knowledge, right? Because my capital is, of course, limited. Duh. But anyways, I hope you guys get a sense of it, and we'll be inviting some people on here, and follow me on Twitter and try to see what I'm about. Talk about politics, talk about philosophy, talk about religion, and we get to network and see what insight we could exchange, we could offer each other. All right, guys. Hopefully, some of that made sense. Some of that was engaging, interesting, and I'll be a lot more professional in the future. If the numbers start picking up, if what I'm trying to do is ignite or spark that momentum, and if you commit to it for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, perhaps eventually you get to spark that momentum, and then it takes off, But there's also the perception I have for even when I write a paper. Right, what I try to seek out is when I'm introduced to a subject, I try to seek out the wave of passion. And then once I do that, I'm just surfing that wave, and the words just flow out of me. Whereas how my Christian friend used to say, as if the Holy Spirit spoke through me, or as I was inspired by the Holy Spirit, right? That kind of talk. But the thing is, that is the point, and support the channel, like the channel, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, write me an email if you wanna if you want to consider getting on, and of course I won't be in this state, but we could do video, or we could do audio only, and both options will be on the table. All right, so we'll end this 45-minute ramble and see if it's at all